Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout tag, which is kind of one of the only tags I consistently do every year, but very uncharacteristically for me, I'm actually doing this tag while it's still relevant. Normally, when I do this tag, it's like October. I think I did it in November once. I'm very frequently late to this video, but I love filming it, especially since I read a fair amount of books every year. It's nice just to have like a mid-year check-in to go over what I've read so far. So I know that this tag was originally created by Chammy. I can't remember her channel name, and the original video is gone, I think. I tried finding it because I was gonna link it down below. So if any of you guys know where that video is, if it's still up, definitely let me know so I can put it in the description. Essentially, like I said, this is just a tag to check in with the books that we've read so far in the first half of the year. The first question is the best book you've read so far. And for this one, I have two that honestly should come as no surprise because I've been very vocal about these being my favorite books. And they're probably my favorite books of all time now. Like, they have surpassed everything. So the two books are The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith and The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. These books just spoke to me so much, and I'm actually planning a video where I go over all of my favorite books and the things that they have in common and like really analyzing what it is in books that make them my favorite as a way to kind of predict what else might be my favorite. And something that these two have in common, as well as my other favorite series, the Wayward Children series, is that they're all magical, queer, found families. Like, something about that, like, magical queer found family storyline or trope just gets to me every single time. I love it. So I actually have vlogs up on both of these books going into a lot of detail on why I love them and my experience reading them the first time. But basically this book follows a librarian who is in charge of unwritten books in hell. Essentially, there's a library in hell where all unwritten stories go, and she is the one that is overseeing all of them. And one day, a character from one of those unwritten stories escapes to go off and find his author so that she can complete the story. And that's sort of the catalyst for this crazy adventure that they go on with angels and demons and different afterlives and portals and so much craziness. And I also, in the video where I read this, I forgot to mention that the main character is pansexual. I can't remember if it actually said that word on page, but it is like canon from the author that she's pansexual. So we love that. And then this follows a magical social worker whose job is to go check on orphanages that hold magical children and make sure that everything is like up to code and standard. And he gets sent on this high profile case to go to an orphanage that houses the most dangerous magical children who were basically classified to potentially bring about the end of the world. And so he goes to that orphanage and falls in love with the guy who runs the orphanage, and he falls in love with all these children who are just so like weird and quirky. And this was honestly like the most happy, joyful, wonderful book I've ever read. It just made me feel warm inside and it made me feel happy. This was just great. So yeah, these two, my favorite books. And I realized, oh my God, I've been sitting here for 7 minutes just talking about these books. I'm gonna stop now. If you wanna hear more of my thoughts on these, I will link those videos where I was reading them. Next question is the best sequel you've read so far. And I've actually only read one sequel, I think, and it was a 5-star. And that was Come Tumbling Down by Sean McGuire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series. I also have a video of me reading this book, not just this book, but the whole series. I reread the first 4 books in preparation for reading this one. This might have become my favorite in the series. The longer that I think about it, the more that I just love it. And again, like I said, this is another series that is about magical queer found families. The next question is, what is a new release you haven't read but want to? There's so many new releases that I want to read, but actually my 2 most recent book purchases are like at the top of my TBR. So the first one is Agnes at the End of the World by Kelly McWilliams. I had this on my TBR, but I really never knew what it was about. This is basically a post-apocalyptic dystopian that takes place in a cult. So the cult is basically being run by this prophet who is very controlling healing, and the main character's little brother needs insulin, but the prophet says that medicine is a sin and being sick is a sin. So she every month has to like risk her life in order to barter and trade for her brother's insulin. Then she meets this guy who's an outsider who's like, yo, you gotta get out of here. This is fucked up. So her and her brother go off with him, and this just sounds so good. You guys know how much I love post-apocalyptic books, and then you put a cult on top of that. Oh my god. Also, it's by a Black author, so if you're looking for books by Black authors, this just came out. And then the other one that I got, also by a Black author, is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I don't actually know when this came out. I'm guessing it was a while ago because it's now out in paperback. This is a adult fantasy book that I've just been hearing amazing things about. It's a tale of revenge. I don't know much else about it. I kind of just want to go into it blind almost because I've just been hearing such amazing things. Everyone in like the fantasy community is just hyping this so much. The next question is most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. So I am going to be doing a whole video on this because I did one for my most anticipated books of the first half of the year, but there's a couple that I'm just like, oh my god, dying for it. The first one is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This is a fantasy that takes place in a puritanical society about witches and dark magic. It says that it is very feminist. And the cover of this, oh my god. The first time I saw the cover, I was so excited. It is totally giving me like vibes of one of my favorite horror movies, The Witch. I love that movie so much, and this cover and the synopsis really kind of give me those vibes. And then another one that I am so excited for is Nightshine by Tessa Gratton, who you guys know is like one of my favorite authors. And this has been compared to being like a dark queer Howl's Moving Castle, which sounds incredible. So those books I am very excited for. The next question is what was the biggest disappointment? And hands down, that has to go to The Wives by Taryn Fisher. I've talked about this. I thought this was gonna be a 5-star book. It ended up being a 1-star book. And honestly, like one of my most hated books. I hate this book. Like I despise it. I think it's horrible. The longer it's been since I read this, the more I hate it. And I have a couple videos where I go into why I hated this, so I will link those if you really want to know. But like, I just don't want to talk about this book anymore. It sucks. I hated it. Moving on. Next question is what were the biggest surprises? So for this one, I have two. The first one being Lovely War by Julie Berry. I did not think I was gonna like this as much as I did. I've been seeing people reading this book for a long time and I never had any interest in it. And then I heard Heather from Aphrodite Reads talk about it and I was like, okay, let me give this a try. And I loved it so much. So this takes place over World War I and World War II, and it is being narrated by Aphrodite as she is telling these love stories to the other gods. It's following 4 different characters, 2 separate love stories, and how they sort of interconnect with each other. And oh my god, this was so good. Definitely one of the best historical books that I've read. And then the other one is The Wicker King by Kay Ankrum, who by the way followed me on Twitter the other day and I nearly had a heart attack. I got so excited. But anyways, this book is definitely gonna be one of my favorites of the year. I read this book in February and I kid you not, I've thought about it almost every single day since then. It was such an incredible book. Basically, this follows 2 boys who have a very intense and codependent relationship with each other. And throughout the book, one of the boys is seeing this other fantasy world within the real world, and you're going through the book like not knowing if the fantasy world that he's seeing is real or if he has a mental illness and it's all in his head. Like, this is one of those books that like I was reading it and enjoying it, and then I got to a certain point and I realized how big of an impact this book was having on me and how I just loved it so much. And it is a male-male romance. I definitely recommend like the physical book opposed to the ebook, because as Jack's mental state is sort of deteriorating, the pages get darker and darker and darker, and it just adds this like really cool physical element to the story. The next question is favorite new author, and for this one I feel like I can't really call an author a favorite author until I've read multiple of their books. So I have a couple who I've read more than one book from so far. The first one is Grace Draven, who you guys know I've been hyping to the high heavens. I love Grace Draven. These are the 2 books that I've read from her so far. So we have Phoenix Unbound and then Radiance. I loved these so much. Radiance is definitely like a top favorite. She writes adult fantasy romances that are just everything I've ever wanted. And then another author who I've read a couple books from this year is Beverly Jenkins. I had never read her before, but I always knew that she was kind of like held up as this queen of historical romances. So I started her, I think this is called the Destiny series, I think, and I read all 3 books in the series and absolutely loved them. I can definitely see why she is so beloved in the romance community, and I'm just so excited to read more from her backlist. The next question is newest fictional crush, and this question every single year is the one that I have the hardest time answering because I don't really get fictional crushes that much, but I do have a couple, if I'm being honest. Most recently, a book that I haven't even talked about my thoughts yet was The Midnight Lie by Marie Rutkowski. The love interest in this book, Sid, was amazing. She's one of the first sapphic love interests I've read in YA that wasn't feminine. She has short hair, she dresses masculine. The main character at one point even thought that she was a guy, and like Sid has the confidence. She comes in and she's like, I'm gonna take your woman and you're gonna thank me for it. She just has the game. She could come in and steal every single YA boy's girl right out from under them. Also, another character that I definitely had a little bit of a crush on was from the Library of the Unwritten, Hero. He was the character that escaped from one of the books, and he is the hero character, so everyone just called him Hero. And again, he is sort of similar to Sid in the sense that he's just confident and cocky, and he definitely is the type to feel like he could come in and steal your girl. Apparently I like that, which is weird because in real life, oh my god, if you have that attitude, stay away from me. So the next question is newest favorite character. So for this one, definitely the main character of Library of the Unwritten, Claire. She kind of reminded me of Michonne from The Walking Dead. One being the way that she was described, her appearance in the book was definitely Michonne, but she just had this like authoritative attitude. So she definitely reminded me of Michonne if Michonne was a librarian. Another character who I just fell in love with, and I don't think I've talked about this book yet on my channel, but that was Crier from Crier's War. I loved this book, but 1000% only for Crier. Crier was such an interesting character. So basically this book takes place in a world where humans created artificial intelligence and they used them basically as slaves, and then those robots overtook humans, and now the robots are in charge and humans are the ones that are enslaved. And Crier is the robot princess. I don't know if robot is the right word. What are they called? They're not called robots in the book. Autome. They're called Autome. I knew they weren't called robots. She's the Autome princess. I just loved her so much. She had so much heart and emotion, because the whole thing about Autome is that they're not human, they don't have a soul, and they don't have a heart. But Crier just like had all this heart and love and sensitivity, and she was precious, and I freaking loved her. And then another character who I was just like, from the very first line, I stand her, and that was Queen Talion from The Wolf of Orinyaro, also known as the bitch queen. And she was a bitch queen. Like, oh my god, she did not give a fuck, and I loved her. The next question is books that made you cry. So the first one is actually the most recent book that I read, and that is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir collection of essays about being Black and queer and the intersection of those two identities, and I loved this so much. I cried during so many of the stories. It was a very, very powerful memoir. Another one that I cried during was Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book was a lot more emotional than I thought it would be. Don't let the cover fool you. It is not a cute, light summer read. It's heavy. It deals with grief and trauma and forgiveness, and there were some moments in it that like really made me emotional. Another one also that dealt with a lot of trauma was The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is about mermaids who were actually pregnant slaves that were thrown overboard, and now they've evolved into mermaids. And there's one specific mermaid who is like the memory keeper that holds all of the memories of their past trauma, of slavery, of racism. She holds all of that so that the rest of the mermaids don't have to remember it, don't have to remember their past or their history. And it was a very, very heavy book and hard to read at times, but oh my god, it was so great. River Solomon is just an incredible author. Everything that I've read by them has been incredible. The next question is a book that made you happy. So definitely, you guys know, it's at the bottom of the stack, but The House in the Cerulean Sea is quite possibly the happiest book I've ever read in my life. If you want to be happy, all you gotta do is read it, I promise you. I fully believe that not a single person in the world could read this book and not feel happy. I'm willing to stake my reputation on that. And then another one I just recently read is Meet Cute Club by Jack Harbin. This was a romance about a guy who runs a romance book club, and then this kind of snobby bookstore employee who was looking down on romance but decides to join the club. And it was so cute. I really enjoyed it. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year? Definitely, I think The Deep by Alma Katsu. This cover is just so beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't like the book. I ended up DNFing it, but I'm still keeping it because I love the cover so much. It's just so pretty. I love this gold detail. And then the very last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Definitely the one book that I sort of made as my top priority to force myself to read this year is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And if you watched my June TBR, you will know this is on my TBR for this month. Have I started it yet? We don't need to talk about that, but hopefully, hopefully by the end of this month, I will have read this because this book was like my main goal for 2020. So that is the end of this tag. Definitely let me know in the comments some of your answers to these questions. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.